Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. Sorry for the late start. I knew I should have pushed this back by another 5 minutes, but I didn't. And there you go. Welcome. This is the live stream I normally do a couple of times every week, where we talk about job search and careers, but not in the traditional way. We don't necessarily dwell on the theory about how things should work. Instead, we talk about how they actually do work out in the real world, warts and all. So ghosting, fake jobs, rude recruiters, misleading job postings, you name it, that's what we talk about. So this is primarily a live Q&A. So if you are seeing my beautiful face, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity, depending on what device you're watching this on. And if you are a subscriber to my channel, for any amount of time, you should be able to get into the chat box, into the chat, and send me questions. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. And my entire purpose here is to answer your questions and try to help you out if I can. Just a public service announcement. Special thanks, of course, go to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. And my Patreons, my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And to you, my viewers and participants, you guys rule. Thank you for being here. The title of today's episode, this is episode number 115 of Honest HR Nitrous. This is called Stop Wasting Time on Job Boards. Let's Fix Your Job Search, live Q&A. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But right off the hop, I have a question that was sent in to me by one of my channel members that I'm going to get to immediately. And let's see if I can operate my own technology here. Here we go. So it says, "Hi, Bill. Hope you're doing well. I got recently promoted at work, and because of this now, am facing some serious jealousy, have employees from within the team." Okay, the grammar is a little shaky here, but I think I get the gist. One colleague is directly chatting with other guys in the team like this, quote, "If I do my job well, I won't get any extra credit." You see, if I'm quoting somebody, I need to go into falsetto so that you understand what I'm saying. If I do my job well, I won't get any credit. He would. And if I don't do my job well, no one will question me. But he would be. Come, let's have fun with the situation and show him who we are. Okay, so how to deal with this? Please respond wherever you can. Okay, so thanks for this question. Let's get into this. So you're dealing with some subordinates. You're managing them. You're all on a team. You're the team leader. You're managing them. They report to you. And they fear that they're not going to get credit or get rewarded for working hard. Instead, all the credit will go to you as the leader. But if they slack off, then it'll be a reflection on you, and you will get the blame. That's what I understand this to be. So how to deal with that? Well, listen, this is the type of thing, by the way, that they can ask in job interviews, especially if you go for a management job interview or you're up for a job as a supervisor or something like that. They can ask you questions like this in job interviews. So that's why I'm answering this here, okay? Now, just at a very high level, whenever they ask you a question about conflict, you have a conflict with somebody like your boss or your coworkers or anyone else, like a customer or whatever, the answer is always going to be, in a word, communication, okay? The answer is communication because in real life, that is the answer to conflict. Okay, if you want to diffuse a conflict, there's a misunderstanding, there's animosity. The way to do it is to talk to the other person, okay, and have good communication. So usually this involves, if there's one other person, this usually involves talking to them one-on-one in private, where people can speak freely, and they're not going to be disturbed, or they're not stressed, or they're not distracted, right? So if you're dealing with somebody who has an office, or you have an office, you would stop by their office, or you would call them into yours, whatever, close the door, and you would do this at a time when they're not stressed out, or they don't need to be somewhere in 2 minutes, right? and say, listen, what you can say is you can say your perspective. You can say, listen, from my perspective, here's kind of what I see happening. When I ask you to do this, you say things like this, and I interpret it this way. I'm not sure how it's meant, but the way it seems to me is you mean this. Now, I'm not sure if that's how you meant it. You give the person an opportunity to correct it and say, like, when I see that, it makes me think this, feel this, and therefore I feel that, I have to do this, something like that. Now, you give the other person an opportunity to say, no, that's I'm sorry you got that impression. That's not actually what I said, or that's not what I meant, or that's not what's going on, and then you talk it out, right? Now, sometimes you just can't do this with people because people are angry or upset or whatever, but at least approaching them like this and saying, listen, I'm honestly trying to resolve this. It really helps if you make a gesture up front and you say, like, I'm sorry if, when I said this, it might have come across this way. If it did, that wasn't my intent. I didn't mean to make you feel like your contributions weren't valuable to the team. They are. I think you're an awesome employee. I think you do great work. I get the impression that you feel that, your contributions are not recognized or something like that. I want you to know that that's certainly not the case. I'm sorry if I haven't shown that as much as I probably should. And then maybe you let the other person speak and you kind of go from there, right? Like, that's the idea. You kind of talk these things through. So that's generally the correct answer to any kind of conflict in the workplace. Now, as I said, sometimes it doesn't always go smoothly. Sometimes the person doesn't respond to this, or they doubt your motives or whatever. But the fact is that you're reaching out, you're making the gesture, you're attempting to do it right. That's what you should do for a variety of reasons. This kind of thing, right? So that would be the approach to this. And then if, like in this case, this individual, they have a team of people. So it's not just a problem with one of their subordinates. It seems like it's a problem with, employees, plural. You would do this with each person involved in this, each of the subordinates. You know what I mean? Now, is that time consuming? Yes, it is. But you have to put a bit of time into things to resolve them properly, right? If you're trying to do it on the cheap, it's like, oh, I'm going to apologize to somebody later if I have the time. It's like, no, you need to put a little bit of time into it, to make time, number one, to resolve it, and number two, to signal that you care. This is important. These people are important to you. That goes a long way, for them coming with you on it, right? So, I know that's a very general kind of statement to make, just communication, but that's really what you want to do. Now, the specifics of what you end up doing will depend on what the other person says. If they're cooperative, or what precisely they see the problem as, do they deny they made these statements, or, they're saying, yes, I just feel that I'm underappreciated, blah, 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 right? So, the thing to do if you're leading a team, you need to take the moment to compliment people when they do something good, show that they're recognized, show that you appreciate their efforts, and that, it doesn't go unnoticed. When we're a worker, we don't normally have to worry about this, right? But as soon as you get promoted into like a supervisory type role, that's something that, has changed about your job. And they might not tell you this because they expect that you have basic management and leadership skills. So usually they don't provide coaching on this kind of stuff. But this is what you realize when you're managing people for the first time. You have to take time and put time into stuff like this, or else you essentially get a mutiny on your hands, in one way or another. Okay, so remember that communication. Take the time to not just take people to task over things that aren't working, but also to commend them and celebrate them and tell them when they do something really well that you appreciate. Give them a pat on the shoulder once in a while. As human beings, we need that. It sounds really lame and stuff, but it's 100% true. We all need this. We all respond to this very, very well. Okay. So whoever sent that in, I'm not going to mention your name in case you don't want it mentioned. But yeah, take the trouble to do that. And this is one example of many where you're going to have to start doing this stuff. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's get to your questions here. There are 25 people. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you're all doing fine. Guy Incognito says, I have a temporary job, but I think it's still worth watching. Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much if you're talking about me. And I appreciate you being here. And if you have questions, you might have questions about your job, about how to do your job, or just like this individual had a moment ago about an issue that came up on the job. It's all good, Neolithic says, I'm currently in school getting my BA in computer science. What's a BA? A Bachelor of Arts? So you're getting a Bachelor of Arts in a science? Okay, that's a good start. What advice would you give me for securing an interview with a company, and how should I start networking when I don't use any social media? Okay, so you got two questions. Let's take them in turn. So what advice would you give me for securing an interview with a company? Well, okay, here's the deal. There are many, many different ways of getting a job. About 6 weeks ago on this channel, I did a video called something along the lines of how I would get a job. And I walked everyone through 11 different methods of getting a job. Okay? They're all good. They're all appropriate for different types of people or different situations. Usually, a job search campaign, if you're trying to find a job, what most people would recommend is you don't do just one thing. You pursue a couple of different vectors, or whatever you want to call them, like ways of getting a job, right? So the default method for a lot of young people and a lot of people that have never really done this before, or they haven't done a lot of it, is to look at job postings online. Okay. We call that the posted job market. Simply because it's so easy to find jobs, right? Like you just go to Google, you say, your location, computer science job, something like that, and search, and it will find you several jobs that you can then apply for, right? That's the easy part. Now, it makes up for the fact that part was easy by being quite challenging to get a job like that, because you're up against some very stiff competition. Even what we find is that about 20% of all jobs that are available, that exist, are posted. Okay, so when you do those internet job searches, you're seeing 20% of all the jobs that are out there. Okay, the problem is that about 80% of the candidates are competing for those 20% of the jobs. So it's very stiff competition. When you submit an application for a lot of online jobs, you're going in with like 800 applicants, basically. So you're having to beat 800 people to the punch. Not easy to do, especially when they're trying their best to put you all on a level playing field and compare you side by side. Not easy to do, Doesn't necessarily you have to be the best of the 800, but what it means is you have to be the most of what they're looking for of the 800, right? Those are not necessarily the same thing, right? There are many other ways of getting a job, as I think you suspect, because you're asking about networking. Okay. So in addition to looking at posted jobs, there's a lot of other things you can do. When it comes to the world of networking, okay, now I'm going to make a guess here, okay? The fact that you're taking computer science, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say I suspect you're an introvert, okay? I know a lot of people that have taken computer science. I used to run a software company. So you're probably an introvert. Now, if you're an introvert and you're interested in networking, there are always exceptions, but you might want to be on social networking, things like LinkedIn, that will help you. They will make the networking thing tremendously more effective and easier for you. Okay. So just something to consider. Okay. If you are staying away from social media and you're doing all your networking in person, okay, you can do networking the way a lot of extroverts do, which is you go and you meet people. So being able to make conversation with people is tremendously useful. Being able to, essentially schmooze with people, go up to people you don't know and start talking to them, getting them interested in you. Okay. Informational interviews, incredibly useful. So learn what those are and learn how to do them and how to get them, and then, do that kind of thing. And, a lot of stuff will be word of mouth. So like if you talk to somebody, you then ask them like, who else could possibly help me? Who else should I speak to? And then you go speak to them. So if you want to stay away from social media, you can do stuff like that. I know a lot of people that do stuff like that. I myself am an introvert. I have gotten all my jobs in contract work and consulting work, using social media primarily. You use it to discover who's out there and how to reach them, and then get like an interview with them. So that's one way of doing it. But like, what I would recommend for you is, you say like, how can I start networking without using social media? I would get you to strongly reconsider adding social media to what you're doing. Okay. Because it's so tremendously useful that if you're not using it as like a matter of policy, it's going to really hamstring you. Okay. You could still succeed despite it, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot harder without it. It's a tool. It's not the be all end all, but it's a very useful tool. So I would recommend things like LinkedIn, things like Google Maps. I recommend you get on there, use them as tools for networking, and you can do some amazing things. Okay, Neolithic, hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if you have any more questions. Boris says, this probably is not a big issue, but when I see a good job ad, I think if I could see, a better one tomorrow. I think if I could see better one tomorrow. How you decide where to draw a line, I know it is a kind of perfectionism, so it's bad. Well, that's for every person to decide for him or herself. You know what I mean? Or in this modern age, itself. The thing is, some people are perfectionists, some people are highly organized, and other people really, really aren't. And obviously both extremes are bad. If you're you're holding out for like something that's perfect, you're going to be waiting a long time. On the other hand, if you're applying for everything that comes along, regardless of what it is, that's probably not going to get you that far anyway, because the jobs you're applying for, most of them are totally inappropriate to your skill set, So somewhere in between the two is a happy medium. Where you draw the line, is going to be up to you, and there is no right answer, and you have a different style to other people, and that's a good thing. You know what I mean? You don't have to be exactly like everyone else. So you figure it out. You obviously want to keep a steady amount of things you're applying to, right? So if you see a bunch of jobs, maybe a good approach is to, sort of list them all out. And then if you have 1 hour that day to apply for jobs, or 2 hours, start with the most promising and see how far you get, So maybe that would be a practical system to handle that. Okay, but don't play mind games with yourself, Boris. Just, sometimes you need a little kick in the pants to get you to actually pull the trigger on things. So I would say do that, and then try and refine your application process as you go, and then the quantity you apply for will settle into an equilibrium with time. Neolithic, this was in response to the BA thing, says, yes, thank you for addressing my questions. You're absolutely welcome, Neolithic, and if you have any more questions, don't be too shy to ask, That's what I'm here for. Yeah, what do you guys think of the job situation? What do you think of the online posted job market? Is it promising? Is it unpromising? When you go look for jobs, do you find a lot of jobs that are tailored to your skill set? Or are you really not seeing a lot of stuff out there? What's your reaction to that when you find these jobs? And then when you apply to them, do you feel that you get responses, or is it disheartening to apply to a lot of things and never get responses? Have you ever fallen victim to a fake job? Have you ever, has something ever come back to you to show you that the job you applied for was probably fake? It probably didn't really exist. Maybe you did get a response, and based on things that they said, it seemed like, they're not actually hiring. Let me know. These are important issues. The world of networking is where it's at. It's where it's always been at, and where I suspect, at least in the foreseeable future, it always will be. There's a lot of very real reasons that drive that. Like, for example, I get on my YouTube channel, I get a steady stream of comments. Some of them like really intelligent, some of them really not. And a lot of them, not a lot, but some of them really arrogant. Like, for example, when you talk about job interview questions, like, things like, why should we hire you? Right? Like, as a job interview question, that's something that I'll get people reacting to, and they'll say like, oh, that's an arrogant question. They shouldn't ask that. Anybody who asks that is like an arrogant prick, and it's a stupid question, and it should be illegal. Like this question they ask you, why did you leave your last job? It should be illegal. Any question on salary, it should be illegal. It is in a few places in the world, but like the vast majority of them, it's not. So I would get, I get comments like that, and some of them, it's clear that people just don't understand the perspective from the other side of the table. If you've ever like tried to hire someone, even to get someone to help you move your furniture or, whatever, it's like your eyes will be opened, like why they ask certain questions and, why they do things a certain way. I'm not defending a lot of recruiting practices, because a lot of recruiting practices are stupid and diluted and rude, and dehumanizing. But, like not all of them are, they can ask you some of these questions, and they're not like stepping over the line to ask you the question, So knowing how to answer these things properly and knowing what they're probing for is really important. Current T says, I would say it's not promising. There's not a lot out there unless it's through connections. I've almost applied to a fake job before, but used Google Earth to see their listed address was empty. That's a good tip, actually. Yeah, generally speaking, the sign of a legitimate company is their physical address. There are some exceptions, but generally speaking, there shouldn't be any issues with them providing a physical address, and it should be legitimate, right? So that you bring up a good point. If you're trying to see if a job is fake, that's one way that could. That would probably reveal more about it's like a fake company, as opposed to a fake job. It could be a perfectly legitimate company that's posting a job. They might be big, but it turns out that's a fake job. They're not actually hiring right now, for that role. They're engaged in some underhanded kind of thing, right? Either trying to get people's information or trying to see what the labor market's like, or it's something more nefarious. They're trying to signal to their stakeholders or whatever, or the public or something, that they're trying to manufacture an image that they're successful and that they're hiring when they're really not. So we see all of that kind of stuff. The way these things usually work is that, usually in good times, good economic times, there's a lot of posted jobs. The jobs are real. People get hired through them, and so on. When there's an economic downturn, or when it's a bust, like a sort of trough in the in one industry, like your industry, it goes like a boom bust cycle kind of thing, goes on like this. During the trough part where not a lot of people are hiring, usually it withdraws to networking. Like people, the hiring that does happens via networking, right? For the reasons that people always hire over networking, which is that they're getting someone they trust, can recommend. You know what I mean? That's pretty valuable, as opposed to a total stranger. With a total stranger, the reality is that you don't know if this person is crazy. You don't know if they're like a criminal. You don't know if they've falsified like everything they've said to you on their resume. You don't know this stuff. You're taking a chance. And yes, you can do background checks and things like that, but those are only effective up to a point. You know what I mean? Someone could have like no criminal history, no like serious red flags in their background, but they could still be a bad employee that you can't work with for a variety of reasons. Maybe they hold really weird opinions. Maybe they get offended over like every little thing. Maybe they're argumentative, they're disruptive, they refuse to work with people, or they're insufferable. Kieran T says, yeah, I'm just glad I didn't give my information out to a scammer. I agree. You have to really exercise some caution with these things. Have you ever encountered, I'm throwing this out there, have you ever encountered not just fake jobs, but like fraudulent type stuff, like scammers basically trying to either do identity theft, like getting all your information by posting a fake job, and, when you apply for it, they get all your information, or they use that as a platform to say, you now need to tell us this. Give me your social insurance number, your social security number. Give me, all this confidential information about you. Give me your credit card number. Oh, to set up your payroll, whatever, some crap. You know what I mean? Have you ever had any experience with that? Let me know if you have. There are 21 people here. Thank you for joining me today. You guys are all awesome. You're engaged in some self-improvement. That's really good. If you have questions, ask your question. And I might be able to help you out. Yeah, you guys enjoy job interviews. You like when you go to job interviews and, recruiters. Are recruiters generally respectful in job interviews? I'm remembering back in the day when I did job interviews, and it was very hit and miss. Sometimes it worked okay, and I've even gotten stuff like high-level stuff where, the answer is no, but you don't mind so much because they treat you with respect and you can understand, like they explain their perspective and it's like, okay, that's fair. That makes sense. On the other hand, you get interviews where the recruiter is just rude as all hell, condescending. They've got little Hitler syndrome. They got a little bit of power. It goes right to their head and they have no problem lording it over everyone, You know what I mean? And I think that's where they get a sense of self-worth. Have you encountered recruiters like that or hiring managers like that? I definitely have. I've resolved never to behave like that myself. And I've tried not to. I don't know if I've succeeded, but I've tried not to. And I think there's a lot of people out there that, like I encountered them years ago, people like recruiters or interviewers that they're not trying to be rude. I don't think it's intentional. It's just that they can't help themselves. They're not educated on how to deal with people, So, there's a lot of those where I don't think they were intending to piss people off, but they really did, just through lack of ability. So I'm not sure if you've had encounters with or experiences like that. If you have, let's get into it. I'm interested to talk through some of the stuff. What are you guys seeing out there right now? Let me know. We've reached the end of the questions. As always, check out my courses if you want to get hired, if you want to improve yourself. I've got several things, the most important of which is this one right here, my Get Hired course, all my advice in one place. And that's where we go through not just the posted jobs, how to get posted jobs, but the networking stuff, and networking tailored to introverts. So a lot of it is online. And the only time you would ever talk to anyone, like the equivalent of a job interview, is when they invite you down, like a referral, you know, and very, very powerful, very useful for getting a job or getting other types of work too. If you're looking for gig work or part-time stuff or, you know, other things, a lot of that. Check out this one also if you want to improve your communication skills. Very useful if you're trying to climb the ladder, get promoted at work, things like that. You know, great communication skills help you in many, many different ways, and they're far more important than certainly many introverts think, and a lot of extroverts realize too. Kieran T says, absolutely. As I recall, I told you the one time I walked out from an interview was because of a hiring manager like that who would be my supervisor. Well, I can believe it, you know? Yeah, it's like, I think for most people, you know, to walk out, like to actually walk out of an interview, that's really saying something. You know, even if like you go down to a job interview and it doesn't seem super promising right off the hop, like based on something the interviewer says, like right off the hop, you think like, oh, for God's sake, like either I really don't click with this person, or they tell you something about the job that's like an absolute deal breaker for you, you know, like things like this, you know, and you think like, oh, you know, what's the point of like doing this, right? It takes a lot, and I recommend that a lot of people should not be too quick to get up and walk out of an interview, you know? Yes, the person might have looked at you funny, or they might have said like something that you didn't appreciate, but I mean, considering the amount of work and effort and stress you went through to get here, you know, you might as well do your best and see if you can like get to the next step. See if you can get an offer in your hand. You never know, you know? You know, because when you walk out, it's like, it's an absolute no, right? You know? So I think most people behave that way. Most people are not too easy to get up and walk out of an interview. Or, you know, you get offended so easily. The slightest little thing is like, no, you know, screw you, I'm out of here. I'm out, you know, mic drop, right? You don't have a mic, you could use a pen. If you don't have a pen, you could carry an actual microphone around with you. You know, either works, right? But it takes a lot to get someone to walk. When you think about it for a second, how bad would a recruiter have to be to provoke a candidate to get up and walk out of a job interview? And when you think about it, like, that would be like a real prize idiot recruiter, you know what I mean? Or interviewer. Like, it must take a special kind of stupid or a special talent to be that bad and that off-putting to people. You know what I'm saying? You know, but yet these people exist. And I'm sure you guys probably all have your own stories of encountering maybe some of these people. Hopefully not many of them, but I'm sure everybody does. Guy Incognito says, do you think it's harder to get accepted to a job now than in the past? Our prime minister says unemployment will be solved by people just getting jobs, but I don't think the problem is available. Which prime minister are you talking about? Canada? Are you talking about somewhere else? I don't care what the hell would a prime minister know about getting a job? you know what I mean? Like, it's a whole different level from where they operate. You know what I mean? And I would suspect it's a whole different level from where anyone in their family operates, put it that way. And if that's an example of his or her brilliant reasoning, then I wouldn't put much faith in it. Just get jobs. Is that like the Nancy Reagan just say no thing? Because we know how well that worked, you know? We got a drug problem in the US. Well, it's fine. Just say no. Don't take them. There you go. Problem solved. You can thank me later. Okay, anyway, your question was, do you think it's harder to get accepted now than in the past? No, it's about the same. It's about the same. The methods change. but the demand is always there. If you look at unemployment rates or whatever, they're similar to what they were like in the past, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Yes, it's kind of fluctuated, but it's basically about the same. It's not like 30 years ago you had 0% unemployment or you had 80% unemployment. You know what I mean? It's about the same, right? So you have the same amount of people competing for the same amount of jobs. Young people always have a problem, which is that they're in the educational system. One thing that has changed a little since the 1970s is that, education is getting longer and longer and longer, and that's intentional from an economic perspective. It's trying to push those people out of the job market. It's trying to delay them getting into the job market, right? So you could say you have 90%, 95% employment or whatever. 50 years ago when everybody, 50% of people didn't finish high school. They were working by the time they were 18 or 16 or whatever. Several decades later, the average amount of education people take is different. You're taking 6 extra years education or whatever on average. So what that's doing is it's pushing those people out. So they don't count as being eligible for employment because they're in school, right? So you actually have a lot more young people that are tied up in school, that could be in the workforce. 50 years ago, 80 years ago, they'd have been in the workforce. You know what I mean? But no, they're tied up in school. So we don't count those people in the employment numbers, even though they exist and they ultimately do want jobs, So that's something that I think is interesting. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm not an economist. So, don't take my opinions, very seriously. But I think that definitely is a bit of a shift we've seen in the last generation, where people are being pushed out even further with more school. And now that's coming to a head. Now there's a backlash against, is all this education really necessary? Is it really adding value? Like people are asking those questions now, whereas 20 years ago, they really weren't asking that. There wasn't a widespread feeling that most education is useless now. That wasn't really a mainstream thing that we were seeing. So I do think that there's something there. Guy Incognito and laziness, yeah. Curran T, on the flip side, there's a hiring manager for an institution I've applied at twice now who's tipped me off. There will be a job posted this week and he immediately thought of me for. Well, okay, listen, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but you know what would have been even better is if they have just talked to you before they post the job and only post the job if you didn't work out. That would be even better, right? So you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe they're just proceeding full speed ahead anyway, just to keep their options open. But it would be nice if you could just get in there before they open it up to the masses, right? That's the idea. People that go in through networking always have an advantage. The advantage is a personal connection, right? Now, just so everyone knows, if you don't know anybody, this can still be you. This applies to you. You can reach out to the company. You can reach out to the hiring manager. I spend a lot of my time talking about this. It's called direct outreach. It's been around forever. It's like the simplest form of networking. You arrive in a city, you know nobody. What you do is you find out from Google Maps all the employers around you, like say within commuting distance. And I know that, you can get remote work and you're not limited by physically commuting. I get that. But traditionally, you find every employer within commuting distance, which is a lot usually, especially if you're in a city. And then, you connect with those organizations. You look inside those organizations with things like LinkedIn, and then you reach out to all these hiring managers, these people that have potential to be looking for someone like you, right? And you put yourself forward. You say, hey, I got this, I got that. If ever you're looking for that, let me know. I'd love to work for you. That's like the simplest form of networking. You don't have to leave your home. Takes literally 5 minutes to do, right? And you're jumping to the front of the line by doing that. Because everybody else, they if there is a posted job, if there is one, usually there isn't, but if there is, everybody else is waiting in line for their job, and they're regarded with total suspicion, right? They don't know if you're in it for the money or you're in it because you actually want to do this work. They have no idea, right? And then recruiters are very skeptical of you, But if you do this, you do something like direct outreach, you're signaling like you are genuinely interested in working for them. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't do this. It's like volunteering, people, recruiters and things like volunteering. Volunteering shows where your head's really at because they're not paying you to do this work. So if you do that work anyway, even though you're not getting paid, that shows that you obviously like that kind of work and you're attracted to it, right? Because even if they weren't paying you to do it, you'd still do it anyway. And you have the proof, So that's kind of like direct outreach. It's like by doing this, first of all, you're showing your initiative. You're the type of person that can just make things happen. You're reaching out to the company. You're not standing in line waiting for permission to do this or waiting to be told that this is the process and now you have to do it. You're just going ahead and doing it. That's someone who takes initiative, that makes things happen. That's a very good skill or trait. Then it also signals that you're passionate about specifically working there because this is something that takes a lot of effort and you wouldn't do this to a company that you don't give a crap about, that doesn't make any sense. It would be for like your dream jobs, That's where it makes sense to do this. So you're signaling all that. Then they get a free sample of your communication skills, like your message to them, right? How persuasive you are, how charismatic you are, things like that, right? Like this is all stuff that you get over and above somebody who just applied for a job and went through standard channels by submitting an application, right? So there's a lot of advantages in doing this. This is why when times are leaner, tougher, the posted job market kind of declines and networking declines too, but not by the same rate. It's still going strong. That's where people usually get hired because regardless of economic conditions, they're still hiring. People still retire. People still get fired for performance issues. You know what I mean? Like that stuff still happens. They still need to replace them and do that work. You can see that in the employment numbers, companies are still hiring. There's still that stuff happening. It's just that you don't see that necessarily in the posted job market. Maybe all the jobs dry up. Guy Incognito, they are often rejecting good candidates. Well, of course they are. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you post a job and you get 400 applicants, right? Now, some of those people will be it's just nuisance applicants. You've said in the job posting, I need someone with this degree, this experience, and these skills. Well, you still get like a ton of people applying. They have none of those. They don't have the degree, they don't have the experience, they don't have the skills, but they're still applying for it. What they have done is nowhere near related to what this job is. So you still get those, right? But you still get a lot of people that, from a technical perspective, could do the job, right? Being qualified for a job, usually for mainstream stuff, for most jobs, is not this like highly sought after thing that's extremely rare. It is in some exceptional situations, but for most jobs, it's not hard to find people that can do the job, right? So the problem is that they're posting one position. Now, when you think like everybody who gets called for an interview, right? They usually shortlist. Traditionally, it was about 6 people that you would interview. So 200 people might apply or whatever. You shortlist 6 that you bring in for interviews, right? You maybe have 2 rounds. You interview all 6 once. You eliminate 3, and then you have a second round with the final 3. They go for their second interview, then you make a decision, right? Traditionally, you do something like that, right? Now, all 6 people that you bring in for an interview, by definition, they're all qualified to do the job. Or else it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why would you talk to somebody? Why would you bring someone in for an interview if on paper they can't do the job? Like, we need to hire a medical doctor to work in the surgery wing of this hospital. Somebody applies, they don't have a medical degree. Are you going to interview? What would be the point of talking to that person? Even if they were like the most amazing person you've ever met in your life. They're super charismatic. They're very handsome. They're very tall, or, whatever you're looking for. They're, very good looking. They're very charismatic. They're a great communicator. They're very sensitive to other people's needs and great collaboration skills, great communication skills. Ability to manage people is like top notch. They can inspire everybody around them. What would be the point of talking to that person? They don't have a medical degree. They can't do the job. You know what I'm saying? So everyone that they interview is fully qualified in their opinion. There's a lot of people like that. Once you get to the interviewing stage, it's no longer a question of, are you qualified? The assumption is, of course, you're qualified. That's why we're talking to you. Right? But now we're looking at other things, right? We're not going to hire the person who's perfectly qualified, but yet is insufferable, right? We're not going to hire the person that is perfectly qualified, but they're too cool to do this job. They feel they should be like the CEO of the company, and this work is beneath them. It's probably not going to work out if you hire that person, right? We're not going to hire the person that has a history of getting fired from every job they've ever been given since high school after a week. They get in there. It turns out they're like super argumentative. They get violent when they lose when something isn't to their liking. It's like, I don't care, how well you did in med school. This is not going to work, So it's about who you are as a person. That's the make or break about job interviews. That's the reality, right? You can find qualified people, but finding qualified people that you actually want to work with, that are not super risky because of something, that's what job interviews are about, right? It's not always obvious. Don't be fooled by the fact that they engage you in conversation about your qualifications. One of the things that they're doing in a job interview is they want to check that you haven't lied about everything on your resume. Right? So one way to do that would be to ask you some questions kind of about what you did. And if the hiring manager's in the room, someone who actually knows about the job, in our example, it would be like the chief of surgery is sitting in the room and you ask a person a question about surgery, then okay, I can tell you know your stuff, Right? So this is definitely something that's going on. Current T says, I'd say there's an artificial inflation of education requirements for jobs that previously wouldn't have needed a degree in order to be considered. Yeah, exactly. What they're trying to do in some circles, not everywhere, but some circles, is they're trying to standardize everything through education to varying degrees of success. I think that that's a fool's errand to try and do that beyond a certain point. You can certainly do it up to a point. It makes sense, but to really try and go what they're trying to kind of do is, they're trying to come out with qualifications that if you take them, then that means you can step right into a role without any training, without any onboarding, and then just day one, you're productive, right? That's something that certain people are trying to make a reality. Right? I think that's diluted, but that's what they're trying to do. You can understand the reasons why companies don't want to train. They, in a perfect world, they would hire someone that to just knows the job. So day one, they can start contributing. You don't have to wait 6 months for a learning curve for them to really learn how to do their job, and then they can start being productive. Right? So that's what they're looking for. That's why recruiters care about experience so much. And that's why it's a little unfair to recent graduates and stuff, because they're biased against someone that's gotten the education but doesn't have the experience. They're trying to change. Education is trying to change that by coming out with very specific qualifications that, the idea is the implication is that if you take that qualification, now you can step right into that role and you're perfectly qualified for it, you know? So here's your certificate in how to be a receptionist or something, you know what I mean? Like, you know, have you been a receptionist before? No, but I got this certificate in, you know, advanced reception, you know, or whatever, office management or whatever you want to call it. And they go, oh, okay. Well, maybe you can do this on day one, you know? So that's been a little bit of an initiative. I think it's, I think they've gone a little too far in that direction. They needed to go in that direction a bit, but I think they've gone too far. But that's neither here nor there. But then, of course, the bigger issue is that you just got a lot of Mickey Mouse qualifications, right? And I've seen that firsthand where, you know, educational institutions they regard students as customers, which is true from a certain perspective. But then the issue is that your students are your customers. Traditional marketing says that you need to keep the customers are always right and you have to keep them happy. So therefore, they're not wanting to give students bad marks. So that means that the quality of the program erodes because any fool who registered for it can pass it, which means that it's no longer of any value. you know, that's the thing. Okay, so where did I leave off here? Guy Incognito says, should I bother applying if I don't meet all requirements on the advertisement? I see jobs that are ideal, but often my experience or some attribute is unmet. Yes and no. Excuse me. If it's a job you really want, then yes. Because the reality is that when they create job descriptions, they usually put a lot of things under the requirements section that aren't technically requirements. They're sort of things we value. You know, like if you could have them or you could not have them, but they're not essential. They're not like an absolute requirement. There'll be a few items under the requirements section that they spell out, which are deal breakers if you don't have them. They're true requirements. But then they also list a bunch of other optional things and they put them as requirements, right? They do that because they can, because when you have 800 people applying for the job, anything you can do to filter, you know, the pool of applicants down to the cream, like the ones that are the ones you really want to look at, you want to do, right? So simply because you can, because there's such an oversupply, you know? So that's the reasoning behind it. But does it mean that like you must have everything that they list as a requirement? No, it doesn't. What I would do personally is I would follow the conventional wisdom and have like a master resume of yours with like all the stuff you've done on it. And then do the thing where you get AI to like, you know, create a resume for you, a custom resume that matches this particular job description that's used only for applying to this particular job, right? So you do a custom application. And what you can do is when you do that, you know, you might not technically meet all the requirements, but you can at least speak to them so that the recruiter or hiring manager, they realize that that issue or that element is not going to be a liability for you. For example, let's say they say a requirement is you have 5 years experience in customer service. Okay? That's what they've printed on the job posting, right? You don't have 5 years experience. Maybe you only have 6 months experience in customer service. But the key is that you have done customer service. You know how customer service works. You understand the mentality that you need to have to do effective customer service. So you've basically got the thing that they were really, you know, was the underlying thing that they wanted people to have. Right? Does that make sense? So if you do a resume, you can't say I have 5 years experience customer service, but you can put up front, you could say, I do have customer service experience. And you can also have like accomplishments that are related to customer service, or stories or duties that speak to customer service duties and things like this. So the idea is that you technically don't meet the requirement as stated, but you would still be a good candidate for that role, and they will recognize that, right? So in which case, obviously, you should still apply, right? Okay, so what I would do is I would say, like, any job that you meet all the requirements for, apply for. Simple. Now, for the jobs where you don't meet the requirements, decide on a case-by-case basis. If it's a job you really want, then apply for it, and then do your all you can to speak to all the requirements, even if you don't meet them, right? So you could say, you know, like there's several things. I mean, I don't know if I have time to get into it here, but for example, saying like, okay, you need 10 years experience in this field to be qualified to do this, right? Now, maybe you don't have that. Maybe you've got 4 years experience, right? But you can say, for example, you know, okay, my last job where I was working on a team, well, most people on that team, all the other team members, they all had 10 years of experience, right? I only had 4. But we all did the same job. We all handled the same problems. We all solved the same problems. I didn't feel like I was the inferior member of the team. I dealt with all the scenarios that they dealt with. I wasn't constantly needing to go to them for help or to do my work for me or anything. I really held my own, you know? So I feel I have the equivalent of 10 years, having been around people that have had more than 10 years experience and learning for them, and, you know, being able to perform the same way, to the same level of effectiveness that they do, you know, something like that. So, I mean, you see how you don't meet the requirement, but you could still speak to it. So if you're talking to a hiring manager, or a hiring manager is seeing it, they go, okay, okay, fair enough. I see that, you know, that's not going to be an area of concern for you. So you pass, you know. Now let's move on to more important things like your personality, your work style, and all that kind of stuff, right? Tarek McRae says, I'd like to say thanks to you, first of all, as I was hired for a temp position several months ago. However, I was recently laid off and was wondering if you have any advice. Well, I'm glad you were hired for something. I'm sorry that it did not end well. That sucks, Tarek. First of all, you're awesome, by the way. You're highly valuable, highly employable. Let's get you a better job. Okay. Now, do I have any advice? Well, it would help knowing a bit about you or your situation or what you've tried. That would help. Where you're looking, what industry you're in. Okay. And I can maybe give you more tailored advice. But since I know almost nothing about you, I would say always remember, like I said earlier, job search campaigns, they are better when you're doing more than one thing. So if you're looking at posted jobs, that's fine, you know, but do something else. Maybe do some type of networking. Do the thing that I recommend is the easiest thing, which is direct outreach. There's a link in the description box under this video to a video on my channel that you should check out. Everybody should check out. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, How Successful People Get Jobs. That's a video linked below. Go watch that. That will show you specifically what I mean in how to do direct outreach. Okay, it's just using Google Maps and LinkedIn in a certain way to generate a lot of job opportunities for you. Okay, so check that out. That's kind of a starting point. So if you're not doing that kind of thing, that would be definitely something to tack on to what you are doing. Okay? Always remember, of all the jobs out there, only 20% are posted. So everything you're seeing on the internet, all those jobs, that's 20% of what's actually out there. There's a lot more hiring going on than what you see. The way that works is that those people are being hired through networking, where you don't just apply as a stranger to a job posting. and you go in cold and then they go in mistrusting you. Instead, you reach out to usually the hiring manager, not to the recruiter. Not to the recruiter. Recruiters deal with posted jobs. That's their job. That's what they do, right? Going outside of posted jobs is where you go to people other than recruiters. And if you're wondering who you go to, you could go to any manager in the company, essentially. Preferably the higher the better. Okay, so start with like let's say you went to school to study accounting. You are an accounting student. Okay, you're in school for accounting. You're wanting to get a job. How do you get a job through networking? You reach out, maybe through direct outreach, to the companies that are around you within commuting distance and that hire accountants. So whoever those would be. Now, if it's an accounting firm, an accounting company, go to the CFO, go to the chief accountant. They're the high, you reach out to them and you say, hey, I'm fully qualified accountant. I'm looking to do work that's similar to the work that you guys do. I know you do some very exciting work in this area. It's like, I would love to talk to you, or if you're ever looking for that, let me know. Whatever, you could ask for multiple different things. There's not just one thing you could ask for, right? But the highest level person, they'll be able to help you the most. Okay? Think about networking for a second. Does it make sense to go to people who are at your level or lower? No. And none of this put a good word for me. No, you want to go to the people that can actually help you. So the people who can give you a job are at least one level above you. Okay? So those are the types of people you're going to be reaching out to. But don't be afraid. It's really not that big of a deal, I was a former CEO. Am I unapproachable, unreachable? No. I'm just a regular dude, And we're not talking celebrity CEOs here. We're talking the thousands upon thousands of people that are in your city that are running little businesses or mid-sized businesses or running pieces of them, Those are the people that can help you. Those are the ones you can reach out. If you don't feel comfortable doing this face-to-face or on the phone, you could just send a note. All you need to do is learn how to phrase the note. Just a couple of lines, right? Understand what to ask for. That's how a young person or an introvert or somebody can get into networking and kick ass. The beautiful thing about this is that nobody else is really doing it. So you're really standing out. Very few people are doing this. Okay, so that's Tarek. Best of luck with that, Tarek. And if you have questions as you go, I'm taking a week off live streaming after today, but I'm normally here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, doing a couple live streams a day. So I'm here to answer questions if you got questions along the way. Or, check out my courses. This one is probably the most pertinent. If you want all my advice in one place, step by step, and all this networking stuff explained step by step with templates and all that kind of thing. Curran T says it's a smidge irritating when the degrees are more theoretical when work experience should trump that. Yeah, well, there's always been a big disconnect between academia and sort of the real world, certainly the private sector. Sometimes there's been a big gap, worlds apart. Other times, it's not so bad, just slight change in culture, but they basically understand each other. But to varying degrees, there's always been a gap there. There's a difference between the people who stay in school their whole lives, and then they go from student to becoming the teacher, right? And the people that have actually been out in the real world, and they see how the real world works. It doesn't work the same way they think it works in school for the most part, So yeah, there's a bit of a divide there, and it can be a gulf, depending on the industry you're in and the situation. But then, in favor, not to totally beat up on education, which I have a tendency to do, but to play devil's advocate, getting a job is not always the end goal of education. Like there are other purposes for learning things. We have to push the knowledge of the human race forward. It's not always to just get a job at the end of it. Yes, that's kind of a fundamental thing there, but there are other goals and motivations. So to be fair to them, that is a thing. You can't always view everything they do through the lens of like getting a job, even though I think they need to focus more on that. Shijio says, do you have any insight interviewing working for a Chinese employer? Thanks for all you do. No, I don't, unfortunately. I know that a lot of people they used to spend a lot of time in China outsourcing stuff. I never really did that, with like contract manufacturing and stuff like that. So I'm not getting on my high horse about it, but I'm saying I didn't really have that experience. Tarek says, I was previously at the Board of Education retirement system. Okay. So you would know all about it, of course. Fit Real Sakib says, love from Pakistan. Well, thank you for being here. Love from Canada. Because as we all know, Canada and Pakistan are like this. Curran T says, yeah, even if there's a preferred qualification that I don't yet have, I'll do my best to address that during the interview and turn it into a place of strength. Yeah, listen. There's obviously difference of degrees, right? Some educational qualifications are damn valuable. They're real. They teach you real things, and they're not easy to do. It's quite an accomplishment to have them. You know what I mean? Others, it's quite the opposite. They're Mickey Mouse, they're token, they're basic, they're like totally unnecessary, and they don't really teach you anything real, So it really runs the gamut. You know what I mean? Like you can't generalize about these things. We see both. I don't think there's a lot of people that would argue that a medical degree or an engineering degree or something is like crap. It isn't. It's real. It's hard to do. It's quite an accomplishment to get one of those. But there's a lot of totally Mickey Mouse stuff that not only is it super easy, not only do they make it a policy almost of like everybody who enrolls in it will graduate with it, it also like, it's really, there's really no evidence that it actually teaches you anything useful, so it really does run the gamut. You can't just talk about college education or college degree like it's one thing. There are different things in there. Right, like I think I was saying this one, Curran. Yeah, even if there's a preferred qualification that I don't have, I'll do my best to address that during the interview and turn it into a place of strength. Yeah, like that's the thing that's always annoyed me too, where they say like, we need you to have this education or equivalent experience. Tell me something. What's the equivalent experience of a medical degree? What's the equivalent experience of a law degree? Oh, you don't have a law degree, but it's okay. You have equivalent experience. Like, what the hell does that mean? There is no equivalent experience. And even if there was, you still can't work as a lawyer without a law degree. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, no, I've heard people say that about engineering degrees. You need to have an engineering degree or equivalent experience. It's like, what? That's insulting. There is no equivalent experience. Like, you can't just pick it up, you just can't. Any more than you can just pick up how to do surgery, So yeah, but then again, there's a lot of weird things that recruiters say and do. So that would be a good title for a live stream. The weird things that recruiters say and do. Fit Real Sakib says, your videos helped me get hired as a cross-border US and CA tax accountant. Right on. Well, that's great to hear, and thank you for coming back and telling me that. That's great to get that kind of update from people. I hope that you're prospering, and I hope that everything's going fine. How do you say this? Jagtej Singh says, people at similar levels could give insights about skills preferred for the job role and possible internal referral. They are super hard to get hold of, though. No, they're not. You just need to know how to approach them and what to say. and over what channel to go. That's kind of what I did to build a consulting business. That's what I put into this course. You can reach these people. The first step is to discover who they are, discover them, right? The discovery phase. That's in that free video that I was referencing earlier. It's linked in the description box under this live stream. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. That basically shows you how to discover them, right? And then in terms of like, okay, what did you say? Preferred skills for the role, possible, get a referral, or it's super hard to get a hold of. Not really. It's just like job search. It's a numbers game, you know? You want to talk to someone who runs, or let's say CEOs. I mean, I've dealt almost exclusively with CEOs my career doing this. It's like you want to talk to 100 CEOs of companies in loosely like in one or two industries. Well, if you contact 100 CEOs, you send a message out to 100 CEOs, you'll maybe get, like what I got six out of every 100 that gave me an interview. So I would go physically down to their company. I'd go to their office with just me and the CEO. And, I'd spend anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, sometimes more than that, talking to them. And these are people I didn't know, right? Like I just reached out to them and did that. So that was my rate, 6%. Right? And I've said that repeatedly on these live streams because what I did was I sent out connection requests on LinkedIn, and it was something like a 30% success with that. So of 100, 30 would accept your connection request. And then I did a second phase where I sent a message to them saying, I'd very much like to speak with you. And I got a 20% success rate on that. So 20% of 30 is 6. So those were my numbers. Those are my ratios for doing that, right? Now that's based on like what I was saying. It's also based on what is on my LinkedIn profile, right? Like all these things kind of have they're factors. The industry, and I guess these individuals I was trying to contact, I don't know how friendly they are, how much time they have. That's also a factor. Right? How many of them are actively on LinkedIn? Like they have an account, but are they actually checking messages and responding to them? Because some people, they get an account set up for them, but then they're never on there. It just sits there, So there's a lot of factors involved. So I wouldn't say it's hard to find them. You could find these people. And if you're going to people that are lower than the CEO, if they're still executives, they'll be even easier to get a hold of. So it's just a matter of knowing what to do. Incidentally, all this is what, if you want to know the specific, that's what I put in that course. That's a big part of it. They're not super hard to get a hold of. Like if you want to do informational interviews, you want to sit down with some of these people and just listen to them talk about their career or their job or their opinions on the industry. What skills are going to matter? Where's the industry going? What are some of the big forces that are pushing and dictating where things go? If you want to hear their opinions, that's where you try and get informational interviews with these people, right? Very, very useful. Informational interviews, I wholeheartedly recommend them to people. Not only do you learn a lot, but as a sort of fringe benefit thrown in for fun, is that now you have contacts. If you wanted to go away for a week or two and then come back and say, hey, I've been thinking about what you said, and that's actually really exciting. And I want you to know that if ever you do move forward with that, let me know if you want some help with that, because I find that tremendously interesting. I'd love to help out with it if that's something you were going to do. Something like that, right? Like there's so many fringe benefits to it. My strategy has been to do mass reach outs over LinkedIn. Okay, but what do you mean by reach outs? You see, if you're going to recruiters, I would say it's a waste of time. The real opportunities are outside of recruiters. Recruiters deal with posted jobs. Everything they do more or less pushes you back to applying for a posted job. They want to funnel you through the HR process, right, of recruitment and selection. The reality is that anybody in a company, any manager, any real manager can hire someone, right? If they want to hire someone, there's not much that the HR department can really do to to prevent that. Managers drive hiring. That they always have and they always will. The HR department is there to facilitate it. The recruiters are basically grunts. No offense to them. Some of them are pretty skilled, but they do the paperwork. They do the interviewing. They do the screening. They do the, they set up your payroll. They deal with sort of interfacing with the government and saying this person is now employed and getting them all their tax forms and all that kind of stuff. That's what the HR department is there for. The person driving these decisions are managers. If it's in the budget, the manager wants to hire you, they hire you. It's just that simple. And they don't know about labor laws. They're not experts in labor laws. That's also why you would have recruiters, because recruiters are supposed to be experts in that stuff, and they are. Not all managers know all the labor laws off the top of their head, right? So they use recruiters to consult with, but they make the decision of who they want to work with. Nathaniel says, I went for an interview today. I think it went well. However, at the end, she asked me if I have any questions, and I said no. I told her I already did a lot of research about the company. Do you think I answered wrong? She did seem a bit impressed. Yes. Listen, Nathaniel, everything happens some of the time. I get people telling me, well, I told the recruiter to F off and I got the job. It's like, I hear all kinds. Everything happens some of the time. But all things being equal, that's the wrong answer to the question, do you have any questions for us? Because it signals that, you don't care, right? That's how it's usually going to be interpreted. Do you have any questions? Nope. No, I'm good. We're done, right? If you're excited about the job and you're like, super into it, you're going to have I got 1,000 questions. How does this work? And do you guys do this kind of work? And, are you looking for this kind of thing? Or is there going to be an opportunity to do this? That sounds like someone who really wants the job. That's really into it. You know what I mean? But so that's the basic level. To try and get to the more advanced level, I can't get into it here because it's lengthy. The bottom line is that this question, it's just as much a performance as any other question in a job interview. So if you're genuinely wondering some real things, which you probably are, you might be wondering what the what's the compensation? Do you guys give benefits? Things like this. You're genuinely wondering these things, and it's totally reasonable for you to be wondering this. Any normal person will be wondering that. The problem is there's certain questions you don't want to ask in the job interview because maybe the recruiter can't answer that freely. For example, you say, I read in the paper that this company exploits their employees and denies employees their rights. What are your company's plans to exploit your employees in the next year, right? Obviously, you wouldn't ask something like that, even if you're wondering it, because it's awkward. The recruiter, now they're conflicted. They can't answer freely because they're representing the company. They can't give you the dirt on them and slag them off. Their job is also to make you want to work here, and not drive you away. So it creates awkwardness. It puts them in a tight spot. So you wouldn't do stuff like that because it takes away from the warm, fuzzy feeling they're feeling about you. Now they're they're not so, what's the word? They're not so attracted to you. You don't seem so promising because they're not thinking of purely good feelings when they think of you. They think, oh, you're the person who put me on the spot, made me feel awkward. So always ask questions. The high level answer is think about what they're looking for, right? They're looking for someone who wants the job, someone who's qualified, So ask questions that signal that you are qualified. Ask questions that signal you want the job. Things like this. It's every bit of a performance as anything else. And if you don't do this, other candidates will, and they'll have the advantage over you. So I wanted to do a video about this. I have to do that sometime. But if you had a good relationship with this person, don't worry too much, Nathaniel. These things are far from an exact science. So if they were already feeling pretty good about you and you got a good vibe, that's probably the most important thing. So I hope it goes really well, and I hope they call you back. Just don't make the same mistake twice, okay? Just remember that for future. I have to wind this down in about 5 minutes, but I'll take the last couple of questions here. Jag Tech Singh says, did you also send... that moved. Do you also send a message with your connection request? I mostly have people not responding to those when I send them without it being, yes, absolutely. Always send a note. I regularly get people that I don't know sending connection requests to me on LinkedIn. I have no idea who these people are. There's no note, no nothing. So it's like, no, sorry, no dice. I've got I don't know how many connections I have. It's well over 1,000. I don't need any new connections. So if I don't even know you and you're not even going to take 20 seconds to say who you are or why you're doing this, you know what I mean? So that's like a general rule. If you care and you want them to connect with you, write, a good note, like an explanation, I have all the details of what I recommended there. So check out that course, link in the description, if you want to take that from me. They're still not going to respond to a large degree with a note, but more people will accept it with a note. Jag Tej continues. Nope, not at all to recruiters. People who are at the job I want or their bosses. But I find informational interviews with CXOs to be something I will try out. Yeah, there's a bunch of principles there. For example, the most obvious one is this. You can request informational interviews, but what's the first thing the other person is going to do when they receive your request is they're going to say, who is this person? They're going to go look at your profile. So obviously, whether they respond to your message or not depends on your profile. If the first thing they see is a picture of you drunk, partying with 10 other people, they're probably not going to accept it, right? If your profile has sales, written all over it, even if it's your background, you have a background in sales, what's their first impression going to be? It's going to be oh, they're trying to sell me something. So no, I'm not going to respond to them. So there's a lot of principles here. Not to always say this or anything, but I cover that in that course. So we go through all of them. But learn about informational interviews, learn about what they are. You don't go down there and then talk all about you. You know what I mean? You don't talk about yourself. You go and you talk about them. And in particular, you ask them questions about something that they know about and that they enjoy speaking about. And just let them go. Right? So usually people know about their jobs. Usually they have a lot of opinions about their jobs. And all you have to do is sort of ask them what's one of the coolest parts of your job? Or, what do you think of this thing in your industry? Or what do you think of this thing that affects you and how you do your work? And they'll have an opinion on it. And they'll be flattered that somebody, is interested enough to listen to their opinion and learn from it. It's a very flattering thing. That's why people accept these, So learn about informational interviews. Don't go in there and talk at them all about you and stuff like that. That's going to be self-defeating. They don't care about you. They don't know who you are, They're not interested to learn all about you. But learn how these things work, and it'll be to your advantage. It's also, incidentally, the way to learn any information pretty much on the planet that you want to learn. You find the appropriate person who knows it, and then go talk to them, right? How does one get hired in this role, right? Is it experience that's most important? Is it your education? Is it knowing people? Like, who would know that? Well, we can find people in that role and go and talk to them and say, how does one get hired into your position? Like, how did you get, like, I've seen your profile, you've done this and this, but, like, why is that the way to do it as opposed to another way or something like that, that's how you find this stuff. If you want to know how an industry works, if you want to know how people get into these higher positions, that's a great thing. This is a great vehicle to find that out. But good. It's good that you're not trying to do this with recruiters, in my opinion. I think that would be a fool's errand. Nathaniel says, the interviewer mentioned that she doesn't know when the HR will reach out to me. By HR, do you mean recruiter? That she doesn't know when the HR will reach out to me about the second interview. Do you think she would even bring a second interview up if she did see something in me? Nathaniel, how can I put this? I'm going to give it to you straight here. It's perfectly understandable that you're wondering about this stuff, okay? First of all, these questions are unanswerable. You're trying to guess what's in somebody else's mind and what's going on behind the scenes with them. We don't know. People are different. In some situations, they're totally interested in you and they're about to hire you. In other situations, it's all an act, it's all a con, and they've already eliminated you. Still other situations, they're asking about this stuff, not because of some plan, but because they're just stupid, Like they don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? It's wasted effort to try and sit and imagine what they're thinking and hope that phone will ring, figuratively. Listen, if they call you back, great, and I hope they do, okay? Now, make sure that you've done everything reasonable that you can do, which is, if you've done an interview with these people, send a thank you note, like within 24 hours, okay? You respond and you say, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you the other day. I'm very excited about, where this could go. I really hope that, we will be working together in the near future. Should you need anything at all, please let me know and I'll get it to you. Other than that, have yourself a great day and thanks again. Something like that. That's all you do, right? You're doing your due diligence by doing that. Okay. Now, if they've done anything else for you, they've given you a phone call or, whatever, thank them for it. Or they've done anything nice for you, thank them for it. Okay? Just say, I really appreciated, the way you gave me an update on this. I'm really excited to hear where it goes, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you again. Hopefully we will have the opportunity to do it. Have yourself a great day. That's all you can do. Okay. Beyond that, you can't do anything. It's out of your hands. And turns out that the most important factor that decides these things is random chance. You can't guess what's going on. You know what I'm saying? It's about statistical probability, right? So what's healthy is not sort of like running it over in your mind a million times, almost going insane. What I would recommend to you is I hope that this works out. And if you've done all that stuff, you've done everything that is expected of you. Okay. You've done everything by the book. That's great. Now, if you have time now, they're not getting back to you. Beyond this, go look for other jobs. Go look for better opportunities. Look for other opportunities. It's a very positive process that makes you feel very hopeful, because every new opportunity you pursue or any lead or job you apply to, there's a chance that could be the one that works out, right? So it's not only productive in a practical sense, but it's also good for your mental health. It feels very positive and hopeful, okay? Sitting by the phone wondering why it's not ringing, that is depressing. That will erode your mental health. It's stressful, and it's unhelpful. It doesn't actually help anything in the real world. Okay, so that's what I'll leave you with. I wish you every bit of luck. You are awesome, Nathaniel. You are going to get hired. This is very temporary. It doesn't feel temporary, but it is. Okay, you're going to come out on top. You're going to land on your feet. But that's what I would advise for this. Okay, I have to wrap this up. I am coming back in 20 minutes. I'm going to be live with my collaboration live stream I do every 2 weeks with another YouTuber, with Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. We answer your questions together live on the air. So that's happening in 20 minutes. So if you want to stick around for that, I'll be back. Other than that, check out my courses, join my channel, check out my other channels, and I will see you soon. Best of luck and take care.